The envelope was sitting on the kitchen counter when I got home from my shift at the hospital. I still had my coat on. I hadn't even put down my bag. I just stood there staring at it because the return address said Pemberton Wealth Management, Bay Street, Toronto. And I had never heard of Pemberton Wealth Management in my life. The envelope was addressed to my son-in-law. I set my bag down slowly. I told myself it was nothing, probably a promotional mailer. A cold solicitation. Those Bay Street firms send those all the time, I thought. They buy mailing lists. It means nothing. But my hands didn't believe me, because they were shaking by the time I put the kettle on. Let me start from the beginning, because if I just tell you about the envelope, you won't understand why it broke something open in me that I'm not sure has ever fully healed. My daughter Abigail met him at a pottery class. She was 31. She had just come out of a long relationship with a man who, to put it gently, had treated her like a footnote in his own story. She was rebuilding herself, slowly, the way you do in your early 30s, going to classes, saying yes to things, trying to become the kind of person who makes pottery on Thursday evenings. His name was Stefan Kozalski. He was 40, teaching the beginner session as a volunteer while the regular instructor was on maternity leave. He had a calm about him that I noticed the first time Abigail brought him home. Not the calm of a man with nothing going on, the calm of a man who has decided what matters to him. He was a painter, oils mostly, large abstract canvases with these dark blues and ochres that I genuinely found beautiful, though I wouldn't have said so out loud at the time because I didn't want to encourage anything. He had a studio space he rented in a converted warehouse on the east side of Hamilton, and he drove a 10-year-old Civic with a cracked rear bumper, and he wore the same 3 flannel shirts in rotation, and when I asked him what he did for work, he said, very simply, that he painted. Just painted. I said, "And that pays the bills?" He smiled. He had this smile that made you feel like you'd said something slightly naive, but kindly. "I get by," he said. Abigail was glowing beside him. I kept my mouth shut. My husband Gerald had died 4 years earlier, cardiac arrest. Very sudden, 63 years old, standing in our driveway in Oakville holding a bag of road salt. After that, Abigail became my whole world in a way that I imagine is not entirely healthy, but is also completely inevitable when you lose a partner and a child is all you have left. She is my only one, and so when Stefan came into her life, I watched him the way I imagine a border collie watches a stranger who walks into the yard. Calm, attentive, ready. My friends thought I was overreacting. My friend Sylvia said, "Artists can be wonderful partners. They're present. They're emotionally available." My friend Barb said, "At least he's not in finance." Everyone laughed. I laughed too, but not quite as easily. Because here is what I saw. Abigail was paying for everything. She was working as a radiologist at St. Joseph's. Excellent salary, hard-earned, the product of 12 years of school and residency and nights she spent sleeping on a cot in an on-call room. She had a mortgage on a semi-detached in Westdale that she'd been chipping away at on her own since she was 29. She was responsible and careful and good with money, the way children of nurses often are. And Stefan, sweet, calm, flannel-shirted Stefan, contributed nothing. Not nothing in the dramatic sense. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't a freeloader in some obvious theatrical way. It was subtler than that. It was, he didn't have money right now, but he was working on a series, and galleries take time, and the art world moves slowly, and she understood, didn't she? She understood, didn't she? Did understand. That was the problem. Abigail understood everything. She had the most generous heart of anyone I've ever known, and she aimed it at Stefan like a floodlight. She started covering his studio rent. $1,200 a month. I know, because she mentioned it once, casually, the way you mention the utility bill. I remember standing in her kitchen holding a cup of coffee, thinking, that's $14,400 a year. Then she bought him a new set of brushes because the ones he had were worn down. Then a better easel. Then, when the Civic finally gave out on the 403, she leased him a used Subaru because he needs to be able to get to the studio. The Subaru cost her $460 a month. I said nothing. I said nothing because Abigail was happy. I had watched her be unhappy for the better part of 4 years after her last relationship, and I had watched what that did to her, the weight she carried, the brightness that went out of her eyes. And now the brightness was back. So I said nothing. But I watched. They moved in together after 8 months. Into her house, of course. Stefan gave up his apartment, a basement place in Dundas he'd been renting month to month, and moved his canvases into Abigail's second bedroom, which had been a guest room, which had been where I stayed when I visited. I told myself that was fine. I told myself a lot of things. My sister Vivienne, who has never in her life softened a thought before speaking it, said to me at Christmas, "That man is living off your daughter." I told her she was being uncharitable. She gave me the look she's been giving me since we were children, the look that means, "You know I'm right and you'll admit it in about 2 years." The first year went by, then the second. Stefan painted. Abigail worked. He applied to a few group shows. I know because she told me, proud of him, nervous for him. Some rejections came back. A small gallery in Dundas showed 3 of his pieces. Nothing sold. She told me this too, more carefully, watching my face. I asked once, just once, in the gentlest way I could. "Has he thought about teaching, even part-time?" She said he'd looked into it. She said the right positions weren't coming up. She said the art world was difficult, and she believed in him, and she needed me to believe in him too. I said I believed in him. I couldn't always make myself mean it. The thing that made it harder, if I'm being honest, was that Stefan was good to her. He was present, he cooked, he remembered things she mentioned and followed up. When she was on a difficult stretch at work, when they lost a young patient and she came home hollowed out, he was there in exactly the right way. I saw it. I give him that credit now, even after everything. But love and accountability are not the same thing. I knew that. Abigail would learn it eventually, I thought. I just hoped it wouldn't cost her too much. In the spring of the 3rd year, she told me she was pregnant. She was 34. She was delighted. She cried on the phone, the good kind of crying, and I cried too because a grandchild, there is nothing that prepares you for that particular happiness. It is enormous and soft, and it rearranges everything inside you. I asked her once she had caught her breath what Stefan was feeling. She said he was over the moon. And then, because I couldn't help myself, I asked, very quietly, carefully, whether the 2 of them had talked about finances, about how things would work once she was on maternity leave, because EI in Ontario tops out at 55% of insurable earnings to a maximum, and even for someone at Abigail's level, that is a significant reduction, and they had a mortgage and a car lease and a studio rental and now a baby. There was a pause. Then she said, "Mom, please." "Not today," I said, of course. I said I was sorry. I said I was just excited and I was thinking out loud. We didn't speak about it again for several weeks. By July, she was 6 months along and I was coming to Hamilton every other Sunday to help her get the nursery ready. We'd found a beautiful old rocking chair at a second-hand shop on Ottawa Street, and we refinished it together over 2 weekends, stripped it, sanded it, painted it a soft gray-green. Those afternoons are still some of my favorite memories from that whole year. Just the 2 of us, the windows open, the smell of paint, talking about nothing important. Stefan was usually out. At the studio, she said, I didn't ask follow-up questions. The Sunday I found the envelope, I had let myself in with the spare key Abigail had given me. She had a shift. She was still working, still doing reduced hours at the hospital, stubborn and capable as ever, and I had come to drop off some things I'd found for the baby and to start dinner before she got home. Stefan was supposed to be there. His car was in the driveway, but the house was quiet, and when I called his name, there was no answer. I assumed he'd gone for a walk. The envelope was on the kitchen counter between a stack of flyers and a box of herbal tea. Pemberton Wealth Management, Bay Street, Toronto, for the attention of Ace Kozlowski. I stood there for a long time. I told myself to put dinner on. I told myself it was none of my business. I told myself I was a 62-year-old retired nurse standing in my daughter's kitchen and I had no business touching an envelope addressed to her partner. And then I thought about the studio rent and the Subaru and the brushes and my daughter 8 months pregnant calculating her maternity leave benefits on her phone while Stefan slept. I picked it up. It was already open, not by me. It had been opened and then set back down, the flap tucked loosely back in. I don't know if that makes it better or worse. I only know that I pulled out the single folded page inside, and I read it. It was a quarterly portfolio statement. At the top, in the clean serif font of a firm that has been managing old money for a very long time, total portfolio value $2,847,000. There was a second line. It showed a summary of holdings. There was a note about a recent distribution from a family trust, his father's estate, I would later learn, and a reminder about tax loss harvesting opportunities before December 31st, nearly $3 million. I folded the paper and put it back. I tucked the flap back in. I put the envelope back between the flyers and the herbal tea. And then I sat down on one of Abigail's kitchen chairs, and I didn't move for a very long time. I thought about the Civic with the cracked bumper. I thought about the flannel shirts. I thought about every month she had paid that studio rent, every single month without complaint, believing, because she had been allowed to believe, that he had nothing, that he was building something from nothing, that her support was the thing standing between him and failure. He had nearly $3 million sitting in a managed portfolio on Bay Street. He had a financial advisor. He had, at some point, received a significant distribution from his father's trust. He had said, "I get by." I heard the front door. Stefan came in from the back garden. He hadn't gone for a walk. He'd been weeding her vegetable beds, his knees dirty from the soil, and he stopped when he saw me sitting there. He looked at my face. He knew. I don't know how he knew. Maybe it was something in my expression. Maybe some part of him had been waiting for this. He looked at the counter, at the envelope, and then back at me, and the calm that I had always found slightly unnerving about him. It was gone. For the first time in 3 years, I saw him look uncertain. "Marilyn," he said. "That's my name." "Marilyn," he said. "That's my name." Marilyn. He had never said it like that before, like it cost him something. I said very quietly, "How long?" He came and sat down across from me. He didn't try to explain it away. He didn't tell me I had misunderstood. He just sat down, put his hands flat on the table, and said, "The trust came through about a year before I met Abigail." A year before he met Abigail. He had been a wealthy man the entire time. The entire time she was paying his rent, his car, his brushes, his studio. He had money. He had always had money. I asked him why. I genuinely wanted to understand. I wasn't screaming. I was past screaming. I just wanted to know what kind of person does this. What kind of person lets a woman believe she is carrying him? He was quiet for a long time. Then he said that when he got the money, he panicked. He'd spent his whole adult life being the artist who was still making it, and suddenly he had a trust fund, and he didn't know how to be that person. He was embarrassed by it, he said. He had grown up watching his father be resented for wealth, and he had spent 30 years trying to be different from that. And then the money came and he didn't know how to tell people, and so he just didn't. He kept living the way he'd always lived. Small, careful, invisible, in small, careful, invisible. And then he met Abigail, and by the time things were serious, too much time had passed. He didn't know how to introduce it. He told himself it didn't matter because he wasn't spending her money on anything frivolous. She would have it all back one day. He intended to tell her everything before they bought a house together, or I held up my hand. "She's 8 months pregnant," I said. "She's been paying for your life for 3 years, and you were waiting for the right moment." He put his face in his hands. I thought about my daughter coming home in a few hours, tired from her shift, her back aching, her feet swollen, carrying both a child and the financial weight of a household that she did not know she was carrying alone. I said, "You're going to tell her tonight. Not me. Not a letter. You. Tonight." He nodded. I said, "And you will answer every question she asks, every single one, for as long as it takes." He nodded again. I went home. I drove back to Oakville with the radio off, and I sat in my driveway for a while before I went inside. I thought about Gerald, about how he used to say that the worst thing you can do to someone who loves you is underestimate them. Let them believe they are needed when they are being used. Abigail had not been used for the money. Stefan had his own. But she had been used for something. She had been used for the story she let him tell about himself. The struggling artist. The man who was making something out of nothing. She had made him feel like that person, and he had let her do it without her consent. She called me at 11 that night. She had been crying. I could hear it, that ragged quality a voice gets after hours of it. But she was steady. She asked me if I had known before tonight, and I said no, I found it today, and I made him tell her, and I was sorry if that wasn't the right call, but I couldn't. She said, "No, Mom, thank you." We stayed on the phone for a long time. She asked me what I thought she should do, and I said that wasn't mine to answer. She asked me if I thought he loved her, and I said yes, I did believe that, whatever else was true. She asked me if I thought she could trust him, and I said I thought that was the question she needed to sit with. The baby was born 6 weeks later. A girl. They named her Delia. I was in the delivery room. I held Delia 3 minutes after she came into the world, this small, furious creature with her father's dark eyes and her mother's stubborn chin, and I thought, here is the next thing. Whatever happens with Stefan and Abigail, whatever they work out or don't, here is the thing that comes after. Abigail and Stefan are still together. That surprises some people when I tell them. I understand why. But Abigail is not a person who makes decisions lightly, and the months after she found out were not easy or simple. He transferred 3 years of the studio rental back to her account. She made him calculate it down to the dollar. And they sold her house and bought a place together in Ancaster, with both names on the deed, with a proper financial agreement drafted by a lawyer she chose herself. He told his story to the people in his life who needed to hear it. He started selling his work, not because the money mattered, but because the pretending was over. He sold 3 paintings in the first 6 months after everything came out, including one to a collector in Vancouver for more than either of us expected. I won't tell you it's been easy to trust him. I won't tell you there aren't moments when I look at him across the dinner table and feel a residue of the anger that sat in my chest through that whole first year after. Some things don't dissolve. They just settle. But I watch him with Delia, and I see something that is real. I see a man who got caught living a smaller life than the one he actually had, and who had to decide at 43 years old whether to keep shrinking or to stand up straight and be seen properly for the first time. He chose the second thing. My daughter chose to let him. I'm not sure I would have. But it was never my choice to make. It was hers. And watching Abigail make it, watching her sit with all of that hurt and all of that information and choose, deliberately, what she wanted her life to look like, that was one of the proudest moments of my life. Delia is 18 months old now. She has started saying Nana when she sees me, which I will tell you is the best word in the English language, without exception or competition. The rocking chair is in her room, the one Abigail and I refinished together, gray-green on those Sunday afternoons before everything changed. It turns out it refinishes very nicely, that old wood. Better than new, almost, if you're patient with it. I think about that sometimes. I've been thinking about that envelope for a long time now. Not with anger anymore. The anger has mostly settled. But with a kind of quiet attention. The way you turn a stone over in your hand and look at what was underneath it. What Stefan did wasn't dramatic in the way people expect betrayal to be. There was no affair. No cruelty. He didn't take money from Abigail. He had his own. What he took was something harder to name. He took her ability to make a real choice. She thought she was choosing to love and support someone who needed her. She didn't know she was choosing to carry a weight that he was perfectly capable of carrying himself. That's the part that still sits with me. The choice she made wasn't actually the choice she thought she was making. And you can't call that love, not fully, when one person is operating with incomplete information and the other one knows it. I think about what it takes to hold a secret like that, to look at someone who trusts you completely, who reorganizes her whole financial life around your supposed need, who lies awake calculating EI benefits while you sleep, and to say nothing, day after day, year after year. It doesn't require malice. That's the uncomfortable part. It just requires a kind of moral laziness, a willingness to let comfortable things stay comfortable, even when they're built on something false. Stefan wasn't a bad man, but he made a bad choice, over and over. Every single morning he woke up in Abigail's house and said nothing. And Abigail, what she did after she found out, that took something I'm not sure I had at her age. She didn't collapse, and she didn't simply walk away. She sat with the full weight of what she'd learned, held it, examined it honestly, and then decided what she actually wanted. Not what she was supposed to want. Not what the anger told her to want. What she, Abigail, a clear-eyed woman who had earned everything she had, genuinely chose for her life. That kind of thinking. That willingness to go slow when everything in you wants to react. That's not weakness. That is one of the hardest things a person can do. She made him account for it properly. The money, yes, but also the truth. She didn't let him smooth it over with a check and an apology. She insisted on understanding why, fully, and on building something new on honest ground rather than just patching over the old foundation. That took a kind of strength I found myself proud of, in a way I couldn't quite articulate at the time. I think the thing I keep coming back to is this. The people in this story who came through it with something intact were the ones who, when the moment asked something hard of them, rose to it instead of finding a reason not to. Stefan spent years finding reasons not to, and it cost him. Cost all of them. More than it ever needed to. Delia is going to grow up in a house where honesty was chosen. Deliberately. After it had been absent for a long time. That matters. What we model for the people who come after us. That's not nothing. It might be the most important thing we do. The rocking chair is still gray-green. I think it always will be.